I think it's fair to say that Dead by Daylight's killer powers are relatively well designed these days. Granted, we'll always have the delusional people calling Doctor overpowered and the hillbilly weak, but I would say that, for the most part, most killers are in a decent spot, strength-wise. Our high-tier killers have been nerfed time and time again to bring them more into line, with the exception of one teleporting freak, and at the same time, constant low-tier killers like Trapper and Pig have been getting some nice love recently. This means that the difference between C and B tier are much closer, and so on. While we have been in a relatively good spot for killer balance over the past few years, killers overall are much stronger than they once were, which is good in comparison to how things were just a few years back, where the vast majority of the killer roster was quite frankly terrible, and we only had a handful that were anywhere near viable. However, despite that good news, we have a few killers that are still a bit, well, bad. Really bad. So we're going to take a look at which one is weaker and which one needs a rework first. So with that being said, first off, we have the Nightmare. The Nightmare has been bounced up and down the tier list. At one point in his life cycle, he was the absolute worst killer in the game. Following his rework in July of 2019, he had a stronger version of the kit he has today, as well as stronger add-ons. And Freddy's opponent for this challenge will be the Shape, who has suffered an extreme level of power creep over the years. Believe it or not, at one point, Myers was considered a higher tier killer, resting in the low A tier to high B tier. However, with the rising DBD player-based skill level, he has been a huge victim to power creep in the game, causing him to plummet all the way to the bottom of the D tier where he resides today. With the battle lines drawn, I would like to take some time to discuss these two killers and where they stand in current Dead by Daylight, and try to figure out which one is better than the other. We're going to accomplish this by using 5 categories. We'll rank them on the perks they introduced into the game, the add-ons they brought with them and how they impacted the meta, the killer's anti-loop ability, their mobility, and finally, something a bit unique to these two killers, the individual stealth mechanics that both killers have. With each category, the killer will be awarded a point, stacking up to 5. Whoever receives the most points will be declared the winner between the two killers. Briefly, before we get into this, I know a lot of people might possibly consider Trapper to be in this spot instead of one of these two killers, and while I think that's fair, I personally think Trapper's a bit better than people give him credit for. Setting up a web of traps with him is very strong, leading to potentially very fast snowballs that I don't think can put him in the same league as these two killers. Again, while Trapper is nowhere near a good killer, I would argue that he is certainly better than Myers and Freddy. Feel free to disagree, but we will discuss these two killers. With all the semantics out of the way, let's see if we can figure out which of these two killers are stronger, and who is, in my opinion, the weakest killer in Dead by Daylight. We have the Nightmare, and we have the Shape. So, we are going to kick things off by discussing the perks that each of these killers gave us, so let's start off with the Shape. Myers brought with him the perks Save the Best for Last, Dying Light, and Play with Your Food. All of Myers' perks center around the Obsession mechanic, due to him having introduced it to the game. The first perk we're going to talk about is the strongest of his 3, and on a personal note, one of my favorites ever. We have Save the Best for Last. Stabiffle, as it's lovingly known by the community, rewards you for leaving the Obsession alone, so you can gradually build up a reduced cooldown for successful basic attacks that are hit. This perk is exceptionally strong with your M1 killers, with a special shout out to the Deathslinger as well. Michael's next perk is Dying Light. It used to have an extremely problematic design that didn't fit in with the other two perks. You were incentivized to kill the Obsession as soon as possible, so that all of the survivors would suffer from a 25% penalty to repair speed. Today, the perk works much differently. Every time you hook someone who is not the Obsession, you gain a stackable 3% token, hitting a maximum of 33% to healing, repairing, and sabotaging speed. You can have up to 11 stacks total. And now we have Myers' final perk. It's one of the least changed perks in DBD history. Play with your food. What this does is give you a 5% stack of haste, up to 3 stacks total, meaning 15% haste. You get this stack after leaving a chase with your Obsession. There's a slight cooldown to prevent farming stacks immediately, with killers who can instantly drop chase, like the Wraith. You lose a stack of the perk after performing an attack of any sort. These 3 perks started the Obsession mechanic, as we know it today, where perks like Rancor and Game of Foot have been hugely impactful for creating new and interesting builds. With the Shape's perks out of the way, let's move on to the Nightmare. The Nightmare brought with him Remember Me, Blood Warden, and Fire Up, 3 perks centered around the endgame, much like how Myers' perks are centered around the Obsession mechanic. Our first perk I want to talk about is Remember Me. Remember Me rewards the killer with a stackable token of 6 seconds per, stacking to a total of 24 seconds, meaning 4 tokens. Each token is given per hit on the obsession. If the obsession is alive at the end of the match, these tokens are made almost obscure due to the fact that the obsession can open and exit gate without needing to worry about the additional time added to the exit gate timer. Our next perk is perhaps one of the most fun and chaotic in DBD. We have Blood Warden. When survivors open an exit gate, the killer is able to trap them in the trial for an added minute. If they can hook a survivor before the others leave, the entity will be summoned to block the exit gate to the trial while revealing the aura of any survivor attempting to hide in the exit gate. While Blood Warden is very fun and unique, actually pulling it off in a match is rather tedious. Survivors need to fully open a gate, which is extremely rare, and then they need to not leave the trial while you hook someone else. Finally, we have one of my personal favorite perks in the game, Fire Up. This is an in-game perk that gives the killer a small boost in power with each completed generator, symbolizing growing desperation and frustration with the way the trial is going. At max stacks, which is 5, the killer gets a 20% speed boost to pallet breaking, wall breaking, vaulting windows, and, strangely enough, survivor pickup speed. Unfortunately, this perk has been memed on since it was released in 2017, however, has always had a special place in my heart. While I personally find Freddy's perks more in character than Myers are, quite frankly, Freddy's perks have had such little effect on the game, beyond a short amount of time where Remember Me was a fringe meta pick. Play With Your Food still to this day has fun niche places and builds, while at one point, recently, Save the Best for Last was one of the most used killer perks in the game. This first round decisively goes to the Shape. Next we have the add-ons of each killer, and oh brother, what a battle of pure and unfiltered mid. Now let's start with the elephant in the room. Tombstone Piece is one of the most problematic add-ons ever made in the history of Dead by Daylight. It has created some of the most irritating, toxic, and broken gameplay of all time. A survivor being instantly moried with 4 generators left in the match without being hooked once, or possibly without even being seen by the killer at all, having a tier 3 popped on their back and immediately dying, quite frankly, it's just not fair. But the question is there anything that Freddy has that can compare to what Myers has? Well, Freddy has the fake pallets, which could be argued as the weakest thing in the game, however incredibly fun. But other than that, Freddy has nothing anywhere near as broken, or in the case of fake pallets, interesting, as the Tombstone Piece is. Round 2 goes to the Shape, putting Freddy in a spot where he needs to make a huge comeback. Next we'll discuss the mobility of the two killers, and while neither of them have a good bit of mobility, I will say that one of them has a teleport, while the other one just has to walk around the map. It's worth saying that Freddy's teleport is disabled at endgame, which is, terrible. However, he is the only option for a winner this round. Round 3 decisively goes to Freddy. Our fourth round, we will be discussing the anti-loop ability of each killer. Evil Within gives Michael the ability to immediately down a survivor, as well as a bigger lunge in tier 3 and faster vaulting speed. The faster vaulting speed and larger lunge are both good. Better than killers like Ghostface who have no anti-loop and just have to chase you normally. However, this is not enough to move the needle in any way. Well, the Nightmare though has the Dream Snares, which Freddy can place around loops to hinder survivors and give him a chance to catch up quickly. Survivor's best option is to simply pre-drop pallets to delay Freddy from setting up snares in a loop. Fake pallets can also be used to cause unsuspecting survivors to loop around said fake pallets, tricking them into dying out in the open instead of looping around stronger tiles. Round 4 goes to Freddy and his mediocre anti-looping. Our final category will be a bit unique to these two killers, because it's about the stealth mechanics that they both have in their kit. We start things off with the Shape, who starts off in tier 1 with no tear radius due to the undetectable status effect. While his loud breathing will prevent you from getting any fun Jin Yanks against any player that is playing with their HDMI cord plugged in, this still gives you a chance to sneak up and potentially get a free hit on survivors. However, granted, that's probably not the best play. You should just stalk them so you get into tier 2 as soon as possible. Once the Shape reaches tier 2, you are moved up to a 16 meter tear radius. Perks like Monitor and Abuse, as well as the Dead Rabbit add-on, can be used to further increase the stealth of the killer. Myers at one point was the best stealth killer in the game. However, today, he hardly makes it as a stealth killer in comparison to a true stealth killer like Ghostface or the Wraith, who have been buffed up exponentially over the years. While Myers isn't the best stealth killer in the game, how does his stealth stack up against Freddy? Or will Freddy be able to bring home the win with his stealth abilities? The way Freddy's stealth works is that when you are awake, you have a normal tear radius, letting survivors know just how close the killer is to them. But once you're in the dream world, your tear radius is replaced with a lullaby that is not directional, however, increases in volume the closer you are. With the dark overlay that is applied in the dream world, as well as Freddy's shorter stature and darker cosmetics, he can often be mistaken as a survivor, especially when paired with perks like Unforeseen to help throw survivors off even more. So, while Freddy has adequate stealth, it unfortunately relies on survivors being confused rather than actually sneaking up on someone. So, with that being said, the final point goes to the shape. This makes the final score 2 points to the Nightmare, 3 points to the shape, meaning that the shape is overall a better killer. When I originally thought of doing this video, I was certain that Freddy would be considered stronger. However, I do think that if we were to not consider Tombstone Piece in this debate, just because of how strong it is, I do think Freddy would have won this pretty easily. Due to his ability to use stronger perks, while Freddy can teleport to a generator to apply Pop Goes the Weasel, Myers is already Tombstone a survivor with 4 generators up. Thankfully, with these 2 killers confirmed to get changes, we can hope that the 2 of them will be dragged out of the sorry state they are in, but until then, in my opinion, the worst killer in the game is the Nightmare. Just barely worse than the shape. However, don't be sad, Freddy mains. I'm sure your day will be coming soon. Well, this video ended up being a lot longer than I originally intended. When I first went into this, I expected Freddy to just completely dominate. But as I went, I realized that his add-ons are terrible, his perks are fun but pretty bad, and his power is super mediocre. I do think his power is better than Myers overall, but Myers' add-ons are just so crazy. Like, Tombstone Piece is just so dumb. Myers has such an outdated kit, but he also has one of the dumbest add-ons in the game. But moving on from Tombstone Piece, that's where the video is going to end. I realize this is my 3rd video I've made about Freddy. I promise I'm not in love with the killer, I just like talking about him because I think he's so interesting. His history in the game is so interesting. But my name is Kasir. If you enjoyed the video, please do leave a like. It helps me out a lot. Subscribe if you're interested in me and more of my content. Check out the Discord and the Twitch. And I hope I will see you next time. Goodbye and good night.